There exist those rare mixed martial artists whose very existence defies the meta of their sport. Brian Ortega did it recently in MMA's evolution, leveraging his durability, aggression, and cardio to fight with one goal in mind, forcing foes to shoot into his patented guillotine or his nicknames upon him his triangle choke. Shinya Aoki also utilized a grappling heavy skill set, but with more intelligence applied to get fights into his wheelhouse, less brute chin and fist strength. More recently, fighters like Diego Lopez have utilized a similar process, finding success akin to that of Ortega and being competitive or flat out better than all but the elite of the division. Other specialists like Lyoto Machida and Wonderboy have made brilliant careers for themselves with a karate background, while Olympic judokas like Rousey and Harrison have been notably successful in women's mixed martial arts. Back in the day, other specialist styles could prove effective in mixed martial arts, like a different style of judoka in Karo Parisian, or a professional boxer like KJ Noons. Sumo wrestlers showed up to UFC 1, and the sport itself of course began with a heavy influence from Japanese wrestling, which lent itself to catch wrestlers like Kazushi Sakuraba and Josh Barnett finding success. However, the most famous specialist in MMA history will always be Royce Gracie. Gracie showed why jiu-jitsu was king when nobody in the States knew what full guard was or how to defend a blood choke. But in a world where the aforementioned meta of the sport has evolved to where even the most specialized of fighters know basic defensive BJJ, it takes a lot more to ride it to the top level these days. Without decent wrestling, elite grappling often ends up looking like little more than a way to keep opponents from pouncing after a knockdown. Reinier de Ridder found that out himself when he ran into the Russian wrecking machine, Anatoly Malikin. Fighting in one championship had, until that point, allowed the Dutchman to take the belt from a striker with notably weak grappling in Ong Lang Sang, and build his resume to include 2 championship belts backed by a 16-0 record before he ever faced defeat. The problem with these specialized styles, especially the ones which rely on jiu-jitsu as a primary skill set without wrestling to back it up, is they tend to have a ceiling, with exceptions. In nascent divisions like the women's bantamweight division, a specialist like Ronda Rousey was able to dominate everyone to a point. Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira became champions as kickboxers more recently, but Pereira lost to the first wrestler he fought and Adesanya put years into his anti-wrestling, and was more MMA fighter than kickboxer by the time he became champ, as he proclaimed himself the style bender. Kayla Harrison and Dakota Ditcheva have become famous in recent years with their specialist styles, but have faced far from the most dangerous competition the sport has to offer. Rousey and Randy Couture set a much higher standard than that for what it means when a specialist beats expectations to achieve greatness. Is de Ridder even close to breaking that glass ceiling? Bo Nickel is not even a top 15 contender in the UFC middleweight division. He showed signs of struggle on the feet with a fighter like Cody Brundage. His elite folk-style wrestling is another specialist skill set which has struggled to adapt to MMA. In fact, in the modern meta, it could be argued American college wrestling is a worse base than jiu-jitsu. At least BJJ can end fights, whereas simple top control is now widely seen as the least effective form of offense in the sport, for scoring's sake or otherwise. Regardless, Robert Whittaker is a big step up. If RDR beats him, then it'll be safe to say that de Ridder has become more than just a specialist, or has become that unicorn that can make a specialized skill set work in a real division. It is possible he will win. De Ridder does have a bit more in the wrestling department than a fighter like Ortega, and a lot more in the game planning and fight IQ department. But ask anyone today who was picking him to beat Whittaker, they would not have done the same after his UFC debut against Gerald Meerschaert. Those who proclaimed they only watch UFC felt vindicated when the double champ of one championship struggled with a disrespected, aging journeyman. But the tune began to change when he stormed right through a more popular journeyman in Kevin Holland. Those who were viewing RDR with fresh eyes may have begun to see him as the matchup-dependent fighter he is, but he still managed to buck expectations by coming through as a 3-1 underdog against Bo Nickel, even the expectations of those who picked him to win, like myself. De Ridder seemed to fight against the type. Widely viewed as a grappler with wonky, mostly bad striking, he instead turned his heretofore sporadic clinch offense into the focus of his game. Knowing he could not take down the all-time wrestling great, RDR tenderized Bo Nickel's midsection with knees and used his superior height and length to stay stuck to the American, tiring him out until the seminal blow, a perfect knee to deliver. That aggression, clinch, and knees themselves have long been tools the Dutch Knight could tap into, yet their combination to such surprising efficacy was definitely novel. The Dutch are known for their kickboxing, and RDR has clearly trained in it, yet he still manages to throw power punches like a chimpanzee on PCP. Part of the problem is being a grappler most of his life, but a big part is also one of the most important attributes in MMA, vision. De Ridder has difficulty seeing punches coming at him, but vision also affects other aspects of striking like timing and distance management, which explains why he is so reliant on calf kicks, which gave him his only success against Malakin, and why he loves his teeps and long jab as a southpaw when he seeks to maintain a long range. Reinier wants to be either all the way in or all the way out. He does not do well in the pocket or even in a medium punching range. Those are just spaces he is willing to cross, and to get hit crossing, in order to enter the clinch or grab at a single leg. But when things got ugly against Malakin, who is, to be fair, a massive, shredded human being despite being shorter than De Ridder, Reinier had nothing to fall back on. His single legs only work on the worst wrestlers, like Kevin Holland, who did nothing right in his defensive wrestling. RDR cannot see punches coming, and his own punches beyond the jab are, well, again, picture the chimpanzee. Even his clinch game is just not educated enough to work against a good wrestler that much stronger than him. He got knocked out once and beaten to a pulp until his body simply could not continue in the rematch, the first 2 losses of his career. For every fighter thus far in MMA history save for one, that first loss is required to grow into the best possible version of themselves. And so it was for De Ridder. By the time of the nickel fight, he was ready to unveil his growth, but did not unveil a new fighter entirely, as some thought he would have to become to defeat the 3-time NCAA Division I national champion. Rather, he leveraged his skill set in a new way. De Ridder had used knees before to win fights. Back in 2019, he defeated Brazilian veteran Gilberto Galvão with devastating grounded knees to the head. In the following fight, the first decision of his career, he had a close call but won in large part due to his work in the clinch, though it was nowhere near as devastating as what he would display later against Nickel. For those with eagle eyes, the beginnings of his new clinch philosophy can be seen even in the GM3 bout. There, all his efforts culminated in perhaps the best combination he's landed in his entire career, beginning with an elbow off of the clinch break towards the end of the first round and ending with a power left which sat Meerschaert down, leaving him in such a position that only the bell saved him. Though the rest of the fight was a mess, RDR is at home in a mess as long as he is able to find his rest spots, preferably top control. But he has learned to reset and recover in clinches and now at long range too, often sticking his jab out with a frequency designed more to hold his opponent off and bide time for the next opening than to actually inflict damage. He walked through the muck of a truly ugly fight, with dirty striking and grueling scrambles defining the second round, before finding one of his deadly positions in the third to lock up a Darce. Outlasting, outmuscling, and outgrappling the all-time UFC middleweight leader in submissions was more impressive than many wanted to believe. But it is also the case that beating Kevin Holland was as foregone of a conclusion as was beating Aung Lang Sang, in hindsight. Both are exciting strikers with good physical attributes, but neither can defend a takedown, no matter how many years they have been working at it. Holland made RDR look good by defending poorly and falling on his ass when hit with the usual throwaway De Ridder single leg, but De Ridder really does his best takedown work from the clinch, such as his judo trips, like this outer reap against GM3. That synergy between his grappling, his takedown game, and his striking is what De Ridder was missing. It's not that he did not have a clinch before this, but the direction he's beginning to take it in is better. Now it's a threatening weapon that opponents have to take seriously, not just a place that both men will mutually agree to rest in. The addition of a highly damaging clinch game can be that glue that RDR's game was missing for so long without good wrestling. It can stitch the grappling which won him 2 belts together with his length, southpaw stance, decent kicks, and the unfortunate fact that every round of every fight begins on the feet. It can cover up deficiencies in striking, provide a safe haven, but it's also more than just a way to avoid getting hit and shoot for the legs, because it provides a framework for his own offense and synergizes with his grappling. One of the strong points of his grappling game is his front headlock, so when opponents want to stand up, they now have to worry about being front choked just as much as being sent flying by a knee. Now Reinier can do damage and attack from multiple angles, putting opponents in a spin cycle of having to defend takedowns and collar tie knees, and struggle back to their feet, and deal with frames into slicing elbows. Even if capable of defending each individually, the sum total of it gets overwhelming, especially if he is able to work this process to its fullest potential. Not having grounded knees in the UFC like he did in 1 is certainly a handicap for De Ridder, though increased clarity and leeway on which knees are legal is an improvement in the inferior rule set. Yet his ground and pound remains a strong point of his game, and he has leaned into dealing the most damage in the least amount of time, even if it means the opponent escapes. It is a very Merab game plan, the difference being that De Ridder can finish the fight at any given time with a variety of submissions, but also that he cannot do this game nearly as effectively as Merab Balashvili. His wrestling is worse, and his cardio is not nearly up to that absurd level of the champ. But it does wear opponents down to ripen them up for tapping, and against an increasingly shop-worn Whittaker, that might be what turns the tide in favor of de Ridder, much like it did when Rob fought RDR's estranged cousin to the south, DDP. A lot of fans want to see that fight actually, the two goofiest looking fighters in the division, Reinier de Ridder versus champion Dricus du Plessis. Similar in having awkward striking, both giant men with good grappling, they even have similar naming conventions because of South Africa being a Dutch colony. Yet in reality, these middleweights are quite different. Dricus is a massive hitter and effective striker despite his jank, comfortable on the feet in a way RDR is not. Despite the technical deficiencies in his wrestling, he can at least get good drive on his takedowns because of being extraordinarily strong, and, importantly, extraordinarily tenacious, in a way de Ridder is not, or was not until Nickel. If they fought without massive change occurring in either one, I have little doubt that RDR would get his block blown off while lunging across that last little bit of space between them to reach for the clinch, chin in the air and arms fully outstretched like a chimp looking for a hug. Yet against Whittaker, an aging great, one who seems well built to stifle RDR's primary skill set, can the Dutch Knight show a new wrinkle? The age of his opponent puts this matchup within reach, even if de Ridder cannot adapt his unique set of skills and attributes in a novel way to reach his full potential and defeat what will easily be the most skilled opponent he's fought to date. Win or lose, RDR has been on the journey of self-improvement, which is what makes combat sports so compelling beyond our raw, animalistic desire for violence. He has been figuring out what works and what doesn't. He's earned his growth with unavoidable pains and is hopefully ready to be his best self on Saturday in Abu Dhabi. And if not, he will pay the cost of daring to go to war with the Reaper. Either way, I'm glad we have fighters who eschew the MMA meta, who bring something different to the table than every other fighter. The fighters in mixed martial arts history who have had the most uniquely identifiable styles are some of the coolest, like Dominic Cruz, Tony Ferguson, and Anderson Silva. Reinier de Ridder may not reach the pinnacle of fan favoritism anytime soon, but he can never be said to not have his own unique identity as a fighter, and I, for one, appreciate him for it.